Lena adjusted the strap of her backpack and smiled at her sister as they approached the boarding gate. "Looks like we're early," she said, holding up her phone where their first-class boarding passes glowed on the screen. Maya nodded. "Dad would be surprised. We actually made it before boarding." They laughed quietly. It was an ordinary joke between sisters, the kind that came from years of traveling together without expecting special treatment. Around them, families hugged goodbye, business travelers answered emails, and children tugged impatiently at their parents' sleeves. Nothing about the morning suggested it would become unforgettable. "We'll finally get some sleep on this flight," Maya whispered. "If nobody steals the window seat. You always let me have it anyway, only because you never stop asking." Their conversation ended with another soft laugh. They stepped into the boarding line, waiting patiently behind an elderly couple. Neither sister pushed forward. Neither complained about the delay. They simply waited their turn like everyone else. The elderly woman ahead of them turned and smiled. "You girls headed home?" "Yes, ma'am," Lena replied warmly. "It's been a long week. I hope you enjoy first class. Those seats make a difference." "They really do," Maya answered politely. When the couple moved forward, Lena handed their boarding passes to the gate scanner. She expected the familiar beep that signaled another routine flight. Instead, the gate agent looked at the screen, then slowly lifted her eyes toward the twins. Her smile disappeared. Lena noticed the change immediately. "Is something wrong?" she asked calmly. The agent did not answer right away. She studied their faces longer than necessary. Before glancing back at the monitor, Maya exchanged a quiet look with her sister. "We can wait if there's a system problem," she offered. "No," the employee replied, her voice unusually flat. "Just stand over there for a moment." "Did something happen to our reservation?" Lena asked. "I said wait." The sharpness in the woman's voice drew a few curious glances from nearby. "Passengers," neither sister argued. Neither raised her voice. They quietly stepped aside exactly where she pointed, believing there had simply been a mistake that would soon be corrected. Neither of them knew that within minutes their patience would be mistaken for weakness, their silence would invite suspicion, and a simple trip home would become a public test of dignity that everyone in the terminal would remember. The twins quietly moved to the side exactly where the gate agent had directed them. Around them, boarding continued without interruption. The scanner chirped cheerfully as one passenger after another received a friendly smile and a warm, "Have a wonderful flight." Lena watched silently. A businessman stepped forward. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome aboard." The scanner beeped. A young family approached next. "Oh, your little one is adorable. Enjoy your trip." Another pleasant smile. Another effortless boarding. Maya lowered her voice. "Do you notice it?" Lena gave a small nod. "I do." Neither sister needed to explain. They had lived through moments like this before. The change was never loud at first. It rarely announced itself. It appeared in shortened sentences, colder eyes, and smiles that somehow disappeared at exactly the wrong moment. The gate agent finally looked back toward them. "Come, here." They approached calmly. Lena handed over her phone once more. "Our boarding passes." The employee barely glanced at the screen, before looking directly at them instead. "Where did you get these?" Lena blinked. "They were issued through the Airline app." The woman's eyebrows tightened. "Who purchased the tickets?" "Our father." "And where is he?" "He isn't traveling with us today." The questions kept coming, each one sounding less like routine procedure and more like quiet suspicion. Maya spoke gently. "Is there a problem with the reservation?" "You'll answer my questions first." Passengers nearby began slowing their steps. Some pretended to check their phones while listening. Others exchanged uncertain glances but said nothing. The warmth the employee had offered everyone else had completely vanished. Her folded arms, clipped replies, and steady stare said what her words still had not. To everyone watching, it looked like an ordinary conversation. To the twins, it felt painfully familiar. Lena took a slow breath. "We're happy to cooperate," she said evenly. "We just want to understand why we're being treated differently." For a brief second, the gate agent's expression hardened even further. The silence between them suddenly became heavier than any accusation that had yet been spoken. "We're happy to cooperate," Lena said evenly. "We just want to understand why we're being treated differently." The gate agent ignored the question. She took Lena's phone, stared at the boarding passes for only a second, then pushed it back across the counter. "These boarding passes can't be right." The words landed harder than either sister expected. Maya frowned politely. "Could you tell us what's wrong with them?" "They don't match." "What doesn't match?" Lena asked. "I'll determine that." Neither boarding pass had been scanned completely. No verification was requested. No supervisor had been called. The conclusion had arrived before the evidence. Lena remained calm. "The confirmation numbers are there. You're welcome to check them. I already know something isn't right." Passengers waiting nearby slowed almost instinctively. Conversations faded into whispers. A man in a business suit looked from the sisters to the counter, then quietly stepped aside instead of boarding. Maya folded her hands. "We booked these tickets 3 weeks ago, so you claim." The sentence hung in the air. Lena blinked once. "Are you saying these aren't ours?" "I'm saying first-class fraud happens more often than people realize." The accusation was careful enough to avoid direct blame, yet clear enough for everyone listening to reach the same conclusion. Several strangers glanced toward the twins with growing suspicion. Nobody asked to see the reservation. Nobody questioned why the tickets had not been verified through the airline's own system. The assumption arrived first. Truth was expected to catch up later. Maya swallowed quietly before speaking again. "If there's an issue, could you please scan them properly or contact someone who can?" The gate agent straightened her posture. "I don't need anyone else to tell me when something looks suspicious." The words carried confidence instead of certainty. Lena looked around the terminal. Faces that had smiled moments earlier now watched from a careful distance, waiting for someone else to decide what was true. Without realizing it, an ordinary boarding delay had already become a public judgment, and evidence had quietly surrendered its place to assumption before anyone had bothered to search for the facts. The gate agent's final words settled over the boarding area like a heavy curtain. No one spoke. The cheerful rhythm of passengers preparing for their flight slowed into uncomfortable silence as every nearby traveler quietly decided whether to become involved or simply keep moving. A teenage boy lifted his phone. "I think you should record this," he whispered to his friend. Within seconds, another screen appeared, then another. Nobody interrupted. Nobody asked the employee to verify the boarding passes. Nobody stepped beside the twins. Instead, people watched from a safe distance, convincing themselves that someone else surely knew more than they did. Lena noticed every phone pointed in their direction. "They're recording," Maya said softly. "I know. Should we say something?" Lena shook her head. "Not yet." Across the gate, an older woman looked as though she wanted to speak. She took one hesitant step forward, then stopped when the gate agent glanced in her direction. Without saying a word, she lowered her eyes and returned to her place in line. The silence spread faster than conversation ever could. A businessman quietly muttered, "There must be a reason." Another passenger answered just loudly enough to be heard. They wouldn't stop them without evidence. Neither speaker had seen any evidence, neither had asked a single question, yet the assumption felt easier than uncertainty. Maya looked around the terminal, meeting the eyes of strangers who immediately looked away. Some seemed uncomfortable. Others appeared curious. A few simply wanted the delay to end, so their own travel plans would continue without interruption. The twins stood alone despite being surrounded by dozens of people. Their composure remained steady, but isolation carried its own weight. The phones kept recording. The whispers grew slightly louder. Still, no one challenged the accusation. No one asked whether procedure had been followed. No one questioned why two quiet young women had become the center of public suspicion without a single verified fact. In that moment, the greatest power did not belong to the gate agent alone. It belonged to every silent witness who chose observation over compassion, allowing doubt to become stronger than fairness, while the truth waited patiently for someone brave enough to ask the simplest question of all. Lena let the silence settle before speaking again. "Could you please scan the passes one more time?" Her voice remained steady, refusing to match the tension surrounding them. Maya stood beside her, calm but alert, watching every expression on the gate. Agent's face. The employee barely looked at the screen. "You must be at the wrong gate." Lena glanced. At the large departure monitor hanging directly above the counter. Gate B14, she replied quietly. Flight 728 to Chicago. That's exactly what's printed on our boarding passes. The gate agent folded her arms. Then your tickets must belong to another flight. They don't, Maya answered. We've checked them several times. I suggest you check again. Several passengers instinctively looked up at the overhead display. The flight number matched. The destination matched. Even the boarding group displayed on the twins' phones matched the information behind the counter. Still, nobody challenged the employee. Confidence carried surprising authority, because she spoke without hesitation. People assume she must be correct, a middle-aged traveler whispered to his wife. Maybe they're confused. His wife nodded slowly. It happens. Neither. Noticed that the sisters had already provided consistent answers while the explanation kept changing. Lena carefully held up her phone. The app shows. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. I've already told you, the agent replied. You're delaying boarding. The accusation shifted attention away from the unanswered questions. Passengers waiting behind them sighed impatiently. Someone checked the time. Another person muttered, just move them aside. Maya felt every pair of eyes turning toward them again. Yet she refused to let frustration take control. We don't want to delay anyone, she said softly. We only want our tickets verified. The request was simple. The response never came. Instead, the gate agent repeated the same claim with even greater certainty. You're at the wrong gate. Each repetition made the statement sound more believable to the crowd, despite the evidence displayed in plain sight within minutes. One unsupported assumption had quietly transformed into accepted truth, not because it had been proven, but because no one had demanded that it be proven before judging the two sisters standing silently at the counter. The words, "You're at the wrong gate," lingered in the air, but the twins refused to let them define the moment. Lena lowered her phone without another protest. Maya took a slow breath, reminding herself of every lesson their father had taught them about character, when respect was withheld instead of offered. Behind them, impatient voices continued to rise. They're holding everyone. Security should just deal with it. The comments reached the sisters clearly. Neither answered. Maya quietly looked toward Lena. Are you okay? Lena managed a small nod. I will be. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm not alone. Those 4 words carried more strength than any argument could have. The gate agent appeared almost unsettled by their composure. She seemed to expect frustration, raised voices, or accusations. Instead, she faced 2 young women standing with calm dignity, refusing to become the angry image others already seemed prepared to believe. A father waiting nearby noticed the exchange. His young son tugged gently on his sleeve. Dad, why aren't they yelling? The man hesitated before answering, maybe because they know they're telling the truth. For the first time, someone nearby questioned the situation without accusing them. Lena folded her hands calmly in front of her. We're willing to wait, she said. Please verify the reservation whenever you're ready. The simple request exposed the difference between confidence and hostility. No insults, no threats, no dramatic confrontation, only patience. Several passengers who had been recording lowered their phones slightly. The atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly. The twins' restraint forced people to notice something they had overlooked from the beginning. People trying to deceive usually avoided scrutiny. These sisters were asking for it. Maya noticed a woman across the terminal quietly wiping away tears. Their eyes met for only a second before the woman gave the smallest nod of encouragement. It wasn't loud, it wasn't heroic, but it mattered. Without raising their voices, the twins had begun reclaiming the space that prejudice had tried to steal from them. Their calm presence quietly challenged every assumption surrounding them, proving that real strength does not always sound powerful. Sometimes it stands silently, refuses to surrender its dignity, and patiently waits for truth to find the courage to speak for itself. The quiet nod from the woman across the terminal stayed with Lena, reminding her that not everyone had chosen silence. Still, the boarding door remained closed to them, and the crowd continued waiting for someone else to decide what happened next. Maya leaned closer. How much longer do we wait? Lena looked at the boarding passes once more before slipping them carefully back into her folder. I think we've waited long enough. The words were soft, carrying no anger, only reluctant acceptance. She reached into her backpack and wrapped her fingers around her phone. For a brief moment, she simply held it without unlocking the screen. Maya understood. Immediately, "You really don't want to do this," Lena shook her head. Dad always said his name should never solve problems that honesty can. And we've given honesty every chance. Quiet silence settled between them. Finally, Lena unlocked the phone. A nearby passenger noticed the movement and whispered, "Probably calling customer service." Another shrugged. "They'll be on hold." Forever. Neither guessed how different this call would be. Lena scrolled through only a few contacts before stopping at one name she rarely touched. Looking at it made her hesitate again. "You don't have to explain everything," Maya whispered. "I know. Just tell him what happened." Lena nodded and pressed the call button. Around them, nothing appeared to change. The gate agent continued organizing papers with practiced confidence. Security officers remained where they were, believing the situation was nearly over. Passengers returned to their conversations, convinced the sisters had finally accepted defeat. Far above the terminal, aircraft continued taxiing across the runways. Departure screens flashed routine. Updates, announcements echoed through the building exactly as they always had. No one standing at gate B14 realized that a single ringing phone now connected the terminal to the highest office inside the airline. No one imagined that the person about to answer possessed authority, extending far beyond one boarding gate. Within moments, decisions made in executive offices would begin moving faster than any airplane. Waiting outside, the airport still sounded perfectly ordinary. It had no idea that one quiet phone call was about to change everything. The ringing tone lasted only once. "On, Dad," his voice answered immediately. Calm and steady. "Lena." She swallowed before speaking. "We're still at the gate." A brief silence followed. "What happened?" "We were told our boarding passes aren't valid." "Were they checked?" "Not really." Another pause. "Did either of you raise your voices?" "No." "Did either of you refuse instructions?" "No." "Is Maya with you?" "Yes." He exhaled quietly. "Put me on speaker." She did. "Hello?" "Girls, we're okay," Maya said softly. "I know you are." His voice remained composed, almost unsettling in its calmness. "I need you both to answer one question. We're listening. Are you being treated with respect?" Neither sister spoke immediately. That silence answered more honestly than words. Finally, Lena whispered, "No." Another long pause followed. The noise of the terminal faded beneath the weight of his silence. When he finally spoke again, every word was measured. "Stay exactly where you are. We don't want trouble. You didn't create it. What should we do?" "Nothing." The call ended. Across the gate, the agent noticed the phone disappear back into Lena's backpack and smiled faintly. Customer service couldn't help either. Lena simply replied, "No." The woman turned away, convinced the matter was finished. Passengers exchanged knowing looks. "Guess that's over." "I told you those tickets weren't real." "Security will handle it." No one questioned the assumptions anymore. One confident accusation had become accepted truth. Calmness looked like guilt. Cameras remained pointed at the sisters, and security stood nearby without verifying a single fact. The crowd had accepted the story because believing authority required less effort than seeking evidence. Hidden far above the terminal, however, another phone had already begun ringing inside the airline's executive headquarters. Within seconds, assistants stood from their desks. Directors interrupted meetings. A single instruction spread through the building without explanation. Every department understood only one thing. The CEO had personally activated an emergency response. They stood exactly where their father had told them to stay. Around them, whispers continued spreading, but the sisters no longer listened. His calm voice had awakened memories that reached far beyond this crowded terminal, carrying them back to lessons learned long before either understood the weight of his position. Their father had never celebrated success as something meant to place them above anyone else. At the dinner table, he often said, "If your last name ever becomes your strongest argument, then I have failed as your father." The airline had grown under his leadership, yet inside their home, responsibility mattered more than recognition. Influence existed to protect fairness, never personal comfort. Maya remembered asking him as a child why nobody at School knew who he really was. He had smiled. Because character should introduce you before I ever do. Those words had shaped every difficult year that followed. He taught them to listen before speaking, to remain respectful when others were unfair, and to understand that dignity became most valuable when nobody else offered it. What once sounded like ordinary parenting now steadied every heartbeat inside the terminal. Lena quietly whispered, "He always warned us this day might come." Maya nodded, and he hoped it never would. Another announcement echoed across the gate while passengers continued watching from a distance. Some mistook their calm expressions for surrender, believing quiet people simply accepted humiliation. None realized restraint demanded more courage than shouting ever could. Lena looked at her phone once more. I never wanted him involved. Neither did I. But we tried everything. Ourselves. She slowly slipped the phone back into her pocket, remembering the apology she had whispered before making that call. They had spent their entire lives avoiding their father's name, believing respect should exist without it. Now they waited, knowing that promise had finally become impossible to keep. The call ended, but its quiet weight remained with the sisters. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Around them, the gate continued breathing with ordinary impatience, unaware that something extraordinary had already begun. Ava lowered her phone. He didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed, Maya replied softly. That worries me more. Across the counter, the gate agent folded her arms. Have you decided what you're doing? Because you're still blocking the boarding area. We're staying here, Ava answered calmly. The agent gave a short laugh. That's your choice. Security exchanged brief glances but remained silent. They had expected resistance. Instead, they found two young women standing quietly, making the growing tension harder to understand. Far away, inside corporate headquarters, an executive's office phone rang. This is the CEO's office, the assistant said. Emergency conference, immediately. What's happened? The CEO requested every regional operations director. No delays. Within seconds, calendars disappeared. Meetings ended mid-sentence. Laptops closed before presentations finished. Senior executives hurried into secure conference rooms without knowing why the highest office had interrupted the day. One manager whispered, "Is there an aircraft emergency?" Another shook his head. No details. Just move. Back at the terminal, passengers noticed nothing except another boarding delay. A businessman checked his watch. What's taking so long? No idea, another traveler answered. Probably another computer problem. The gate agent nodded confidently. We'll continue shortly. She believed the situation remained under her control. Maya quietly looked toward the departure screen. It feels different now, she whispered. Ava nodded. Because someone finally listened, neither sister smiled. They understood that listening alone would never repair what had already happened. Above them, departure information suddenly refreshed. One line disappeared, then another. Nearby employees stared at their handheld devices as urgent notifications arrived almost together. A supervisor frowned. Operations just ordered every boarding process to pause until further notice. For the first time that morning, uncertainty reached the people who had seemed certain of everything. The silence changed sides. The quiet confidence surrounding the gate began to feel strangely fragile. The twins remained exactly where their father had asked them to stay, saying nothing more. Around them, conversations faded into uneasy whispers as employees checked their radios more often than the departure screens. None of the passengers understood why the atmosphere had shifted, but everyone could feel it. Somewhere beyond the terminal, decisions had already been made. Inside headquarters, urgent messages reached operations managers one after another. Hold departures until further notice. No exceptions. Executive review is now active. No explanation followed. Only instructions that demanded immediate action. Managers who normally questioned delays obeyed without hesitation. Something serious had happened across executive offices. Phones rang almost non-stop. The chairman's office is requesting everyone now. Cancel the afternoon meeting. We're heading to Terminal 7. Assistants hurried through hallways carrying folders that nobody had asked for minutes earlier. Calm executives suddenly walked with visible urgency, exchanging short glances instead of conversations. Meanwhile, boarding announcements across several gates unexpectedly stopped. Passengers stared at frozen departure screens. Why aren't we boarding? Is there a weather problem? Employees simply replied, we're waiting for operations. Questions spread much faster than answers. Rumors filled waiting areas. I heard security found someone dangerous. No. Maybe it's a system failure. Nobody guessed the disruption had begun with two sisters holding valid boarding passes. The gate agent watched the growing confusion without concern. She folded her arms. I followed company policy, she quietly told a coworker. The coworker hesitated before answering. I hope that's still true. Nearby, airport security officers waited for fresh instructions that never came. Their radios remained unusually silent. Experienced officers exchanged puzzled looks, sensing that authority had quietly shifted. Somewhere above them, then several employees noticed a black executive vehicle entering airport property and driving directly toward Terminal 7. One baggage handler whispered. That's not normal, another replied softly. Someone important is coming. Only the twins understood the reason, and even they never imagined how many lives that single respectful phone call was already beginning to change. He ended the call without another word. The screen went dark, but something had already changed inside both sisters. Their father had never rushed to rescue them before. If he said he was coming, they knew he would arrive as a father first, not as the man who led one of the country's largest airlines. Around them, however, nothing seemed different. The gate agent still stood behind the counter with practiced confidence, occasionally glancing toward them as though expecting an apology instead of the truth. Then movement began at the terminal entrance. A simple black sedan rolled to the curb without flashing lights or a police escort. It looked like every other executive vehicle arriving at the airport, yet several airline officials straightened the moment they saw it. He's here, one regional manager whispered. Another executive hurried forward. We need to meet him before he reaches the gate. Within seconds, several senior officials moved quickly across the terminal, their polished confidence replaced by visible anxiety. They rehearsed explanations under their breath, hoping to control the conversation before it reached the waiting passengers. The sedan door opened. The man stepped out wearing an ordinary dark suit, carrying nothing except a quiet expression. He acknowledged no cameras, accepted no greetings, and ignored every hand extended toward him. Sir, please, let us explain, one executive pleaded. He continued walking. We've already started reviewing the situation. Still, he never slowed. Every executive gradually stepped aside, realizing no carefully prepared apology would come before the people who mattered most. The sisters finally saw him approaching. Their father crossed the final few steps, stopping directly before them. His eyes searched their faces with unmistakable concern. Are you both okay? Emily swallowed hard before answering. We're okay, Dad. Sophia nodded quietly. We stayed calm. I know you did, he replied softly. The surrounding conversations faded into complete silence. Passengers lowered their phones. Security officers exchanged uncertain looks. Even the gate agent seemed unable to breathe normally. Then someone near the boarding desk whispered the question everyone had been avoiding. Who is he? An executive answered quietly, yet every person nearby heard the words. He's the CEO. The whisper that followed the revelation spread faster than any official announcement ever could. Employees who had spoken with certainty only minutes earlier now searched one another's faces for answers nobody seemed willing to give. The confident rhythm of the terminal had quietly disappeared. A customer service representative leaned toward another employee. Did you hear? Corporate wants every report. They never move this fast, the second replied. They already are. Nearby, security officers reviewed the timeline together. One call changed everything, one officer murmured. No, his supervisor answered. One decision did. Their words settled heavily between them. Inside the operations office, investigators requested surveillance footage from every nearby camera. Nobody argued. Nobody delayed. Screens illuminated with silent recordings that neither defended nor accused anyone. The truth had been waiting patiently from the beginning. At the gate, passengers were approached one by one. Can you tell us exactly what you saw? An investigator asked. The first witness hesitated. I thought the girls refused instructions. Another passenger quietly interrupted. No, they stayed calm the whole time. A third lowered his eyes. I don't think I actually watched. I just believed what I heard. Each statement sounded slightly different. Yet every new conversation weakened the original accusation. Supervisors gathered around the boarding records. Their tickets were valid. No security alerts? None. So why were they stopped? Silence answered before anyone could. The smallest details suddenly carried enormous weight. Calm voices, authentic documents, respectful behavior, facts everyone had ignored while assumptions led the conversation. Phones continued ringing across departments. Executive review starts. Immediately, everyone submits written statements. No speculation, only verified facts. Managers stopped protecting routines and started protecting evidence. Far beyond Terminal 7, senior leadership understood the uncomfortable reality. A single boarding gate had become more than an operational problem. It had become a mirror reflecting the culture of the airline itself, and everyone knew that reflection could no longer be ignored by anyone. As investigators compared statements with archived records, an uncomfortable realization quietly emerged. This incident was not standing alone. It was standing on top of years of ignored warnings. The room grew heavier as another folder landed on the conference table. An investigator looked up. "I've found similar complaints." "How many?" "More than anyone expected." He opened another file. Different airports, different employees. Same pattern. No one rushed to answer. Another executive read aloud. Passenger reported being questioned despite valid documents. He turned another page. Family removed for additional screening without clear reason. Another. Complaint closed. No policy violation found. The silence became impossible to ignore. These weren't isolated. Someone whispered, "No." The chairman replied quietly, "We treated them that way." The review shifted toward company procedures. A compliance officer sighed. Employees followed policy language, or hid behind it. Another executive asked. Nobody challenged the question. Training manuals appeared beside investigation reports. A younger supervisor frowned. New staff copied senior employees. They believed experience meant fairness, and nobody asked whether the habit itself was wrong. Across the table, one manager remembered his first months with the airline. "I questioned something once." "What happened?" "My supervisor said, 'We've always done it this way.'" "And you stopped asking?" He nodded without speaking. Another investigator opened unresolved complaint files. Most received polite responses, but meaningful action, almost none. The room understood exactly what that meant. Years of respectful complaints had quietly disappeared into paperwork, while confidence replaced evidence in daily decisions. Employees trusted instinct more than facts, and those instincts had been shaped by assumptions repeated until they felt normal. Finally, the chairman closed the last folder. "This isn't about one gate." "Agent," nobody interrupted. "This isn't even about one airport." He looked around the room before continuing. "We failed to recognize a culture that rewarded certainty instead of fairness." Every executive lowered their eyes. The twins had not exposed a single mistake. They had uncovered an entire system that had quietly mistaken routine for justice, and that truth could never be filed away. Again, the weight of that realization had barely settled before another change swept. Across Terminal 7, the same security officers who had stood firmly beside the gate agent now pressed their earpieces, listening instead of directing. Something invisible had shifted and everyone could feel it. One officer lowered his radio. "We've received updated instructions." "From Airport Command?" Another asked. He shook his head. "Higher." Neither man spoke again. Across the gate, senior executives approached with calm, measured steps. No one raised a voice. No dramatic orders echoed through the terminal. Their quiet presence alone changed the atmosphere more completely than shouting ever could. One executive addressed security politely. "Thank you. We'll handle everything from here." The officers stepped back without protest. Nearby supervisors answered nearly. "Simultaneous phone calls. Yes, I understand. We'll begin." Immediately, every conversation ended the same way. Passengers noticed expressions changing faster than words. Managers who had seemed relaxed only minutes earlier suddenly carried notebooks instead of confidence. Whispers replaced routine instructions as every department realized the investigation had already begun. The gate agent swallowed hard. This is getting out of control," she murmured. A supervisor looked at her gently. "No, He paused. It was already out of control before anyone called headquarters. For the first time, she struggled to answer. Investigators placed company policies beside witness statements and boarding records, one compliance officer pointed. Quietly, the policy required verification. Another nodded. But verification never happened. The printed rules no longer defended anyone. They highlighted every step that had been skipped. The gate agent watched each page turn. Her shoulders slowly dropped. I thought I was protecting the airline. The investigator answered without anger. The airline is protected when passengers are treated fairly, no one argued. Before rumors could become official explanations, administrative reviews were already underway. Identification badges were requested, reports collected, and timelines documented with careful precision. Passengers watched the scene unfold in respectful silence. The twins remained composed, saying almost nothing. Leadership had arrived without spectacle, and accountability reached the gate before excuses had the chance to organize themselves. In that quiet terminal, everyone witnessed the same undeniable truth. Real authority never protects pride first. It protects justice, even when the cost reaches its own doorstep. Departure boards flickered almost at once. One by one, green departure times turned yellow with the same unfamiliar word: delayed. Confused travelers lifted their eyes toward the electronic screens while murmurs replaced ordinary terminal noise. No storm threatened the airport. No maintenance alerts appeared. Yet the carefully timed rhythm of departures slowed without explanation. Inside one aircraft, already pushed back from the gate, the captain adjusted his headset. Operations? Confirm the hold. The reply came calmly. Remain in position until further notice. Is this weather-related? Negative, Captain. Stand by for additional instructions. He exchanged a brief glance with his first officer. That never happens without a serious reason. Across nearby gates, boarding agents stood beside open scanners while aircraft waited fully prepared. Flight attendants smiled apologetically as passengers questioned the unexpected delays. We're sorry for the inconvenience, one attendant repeated. When will we board? A traveler asked. I honestly don't know yet. The uncertainty spread faster than frustration. At customer service counters, families searched for answers. Why has every flight stopped? Employees looked toward supervisors before responding. We've been asked to wait for further updates. The rehearsed words sounded steady, but their uneasy faces revealed they understood little more than the passengers. Behind secured office doors, operations managers reviewed reports together. We cannot resume. Normal departures yet? One director said firmly. Another nodded. Schedules can recover. He closed the investigation folder. Trust won't. If we ignore this. No one argued. For the first time that morning, protecting integrity carried greater importance than protecting on-time performance. Throughout the airport, whispers connected scattered events into one growing realization. Every delayed aircraft, every unanswered announcement, every urgent executive meeting pointed back to Terminal 7. Li Xiu. Twins remained quietly seated near the gate where everything had begun. Neither sister celebrated, neither demanded attention. They simply waited together while an entire airport paused around them without intending to. Two calm young women had forced one of the nation's largest airlines to stop moving long enough to face the truth it had overlooked for years. The airport remained unusually still, but behind secured office doors the investigation moved with remarkable speed. Leadership understood that facts could disappear beneath rumors unless they were protected first. Before speculation escaped the terminal, investigators quietly secured every surveillance recording covering Terminal 7. Multiple camera angles were copied, sealed, and time-stamped. Unlike frightened witnesses, the footage neither judged nor defended anyone. It simply remembered. A review officer pressed play. No interruptions, she instructed. The room fell silent. Every recorded conversation suddenly carried new weight. Radio messages, internal calls, and brief exchanges that once sounded routine now revealed subtle assumptions hiding beneath ordinary words. Did anyone verify the boarding passes? A pause followed. I believed the gate agent already had. You believed? No answer came. Investigators continued listening, allowing uncomfortable silence to expose more than accusations ever could. Meanwhile, formal witness interviews began. A passenger who had confidently defended the gate agent earlier shifted uneasily. "I thought those girls were causing trouble." "What did they actually do?" the investigator asked. He frowned. "They mostly stood there." "Did they argue?" "No." "Threaten anyone?" "No." His certainty quietly dissolved. Elsewhere, employees started recalling forgotten details. They kept saying, "Please." One attendant whispered. They thanked security. Another remembered. They never raised their voices, those meeting after meeting. Opinions disappeared beneath documented facts. Executives stopped asking what employees believed had happened and focused entirely on recordings, timestamps, boarding records, and verified witness statements. Piece by piece, evidence quietly dismantled the narrative built during those first emotional minutes. Outside the investigation rooms, passengers still discussed rumors, unaware that the truth had already changed direction. News organizations had not yet published a single headline, but inside headquarters the story looked completely different. Accountability was no longer waiting for public pressure. It had already begun, guided not by emotion or reputation, but by facts that could neither forget nor be persuaded to lie. The investigation room remained silent after the previous findings, yet one final task remained. Investigators opened synchronized surveillance recordings from every available camera surrounding Terminal 7. Different angles captured identical moments, confirming the same painful truth. Nothing important changed between perspectives. "Play them together," the lead investigator said. Multiple screens moved in perfect sync. The twins waited patiently. They presented valid boarding passes. They answered every question respectfully. They never shouted, argued, or resisted. One executive whispered. They followed every rule. No one disagreed. The footage continued. Employees became increasingly forceful, even though the sisters remained calm. Each replay showed authority, not the passengers, raising the tension. Routine procedures slowly became public humiliation. Silence settled across the room. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended what appeared on screen. Senior leaders watched familiar employees make irreversible mistakes. Confidence disappeared from every face. One manager quietly admitted, "We failed them before anyone checked the facts." Another lowered his eyes. The recordings kept playing. Every explanation offered earlier collapsed beneath the evidence. Written policies no longer protected careless decisions because the cameras preserved each choice exactly as it happened. Bias looked unmistakable when stripped of confident voices and emotional assumptions. When the final video ended, nobody requested another review. Nobody argued over intentions. The truth required no dramatic speech because every silent recording had already answered the only question that mattered. The chairman slowly stood. "Make this right," he said. No applause followed, only quiet. Determination filled the room. Outside, reporters still searched for fragments of information. Inside headquarters, however, the outcome had already changed. The cameras had remembered everything without anger, opinion, or fear. Because they never blinked, justice no longer depended upon memory, influence, or pride. It depended upon undeniable truth, patiently waiting for honest people to accept what had always been visible together. The chairman's quiet order echoed through every department long after the investigation room emptied. By morning, investigators noticed something unexpected. Their secure reporting line kept ringing. Former employees who had remained silent for years were finally reaching out, each carrying memories they had buried to protect their careers. "Think it's time I tell someone," one retired supervisor said softly. "We're listening," the investigator replied. "I saw things I should have challenged." That single conversation opened the door for many others. Archived complaint files were retrieved from forgotten storage boxes. Old emails, dismissed reports, and unresolved internal reviews resurfaced. Documents once treated as isolated misunderstandings suddenly aligned with remarkable consistency. The similarities were impossible to ignore. "This isn't one incident," an analyst murmured while organizing the files. "It's a pattern. Testimony after testimony described nearly identical experiences. Different airports, different years, different employees. Yet the language remained painfully familiar. Respectful black passengers questioned more aggressively. Ordinary actions viewed with greater suspicion. Small assumptions repeated until they quietly became accepted practice. The investigation reached former managers. Were concerns ever raised before? An executive asked. A supervisor lowered his head. several times. And? We discussed them, then moved on. The admission hung heavily over the room. As more witnesses stepped forward, courage quietly spread. One employee's honesty encouraged another. I stayed silent because I thought nobody would believe me. You aren't alone anymore, an investigator assured her. Fear slowly surrendered to trust. Workers who had spent years protecting their jobs now believed the investigation would finally protect the truth instead. Statements grew longer, more detailed, and more confident with every passing hour. Soon, leadership recognized the investigation had outgrown Terminal 7 completely. It was no longer centered on two sisters denied boarding. It had become a searching examination of workplace culture, overlooked warnings, and institutional responsibility. What began with one painful encounter had uncovered years of hidden failures waiting beneath routine operations. For the first time, the airline was not simply investigating what happened at one gate. It was confronting the system that had quietly allowed similar moments to happen again and again without meaningful change. The realization spread through the airline faster than any official announcement. But for the gate agent, it arrived one quiet piece at a time. Sitting across from investigators, she watched the evidence laid out carefully before her. Every recording, every report, every witness statement stripped away the certainty she had carried only hours earlier. The confidence that once felt unshakable quietly disappeared beneath undeniable truth. She lowered her eyes. "I thought I was doing my job," she whispered. The investigator answered gently, "Doing? Your job should never require ignoring fairness." His words lingered longer than any accusation. Her mind replayed the encounter, from beginning to end. She remembered the suspicious glance she gave the twins before speaking. She remembered questioning their boarding passes without checking the system first. She remembered dismissing their calm explanations. Moments she once considered routine now felt painfully different. When she finally looked across the room, she truly saw them for the first time. Not suspicious passengers, not a problem to solve, just two respectful sisters who had wanted to board their flight like everyone else. No executive raised a voice. No one insulted her. The evidence alone carried enough weight to make every excuse feel meaningless. Silence filled the room more completely than anger ever could. "I hurt them," she admitted quietly. No one argued. The truth had already spoken. Surprisingly, thoughts of suspension no longer frightened her most. What hurt far more was realizing that two innocent young women had carried embarrassment she had created with a single assumption. Outside the conference room, co-workers passed without stopping. Friends who once greeted her warmly avoided eye contact. Nobody criticized her openly. Their distance said everything. Standing alone beside the empty window, she finally understood what had truly been lost. It was never just a delayed flight or even her career. Trust had disappeared. Respect had vanished. She realized prejudice had cost far more than she ever imagined. And no apology could erase the quiet pain her choices had placed upon two strangers who had offered her nothing except patience and dignity from the very beginning. Weight of that realization stayed with everyone long after the meeting ended. No reporters had entered the room yet, and no official statements had been released. But something important had already changed. The twins stood together quietly while executives gathered nearby, waiting to hear what they wanted. The older sister spoke first. "We're not here for revenge." Her words surprised everyone. The younger sister nodded. "We only wanted to be treated like every other passenger." Silence settled across the room. Their father looked toward the airline's leadership before speaking in the same calm voice that had guided the entire investigation. "I could make this about my daughters," he said, "but this was never only about my family." Every executive listened carefully. If fairness depends on knowing someone's last name, then fairness doesn't exist. No one interrupted him. He continued, "There are families who don't have someone they can call. They deserve the same respect my daughters should have received today." Several employees slowly lowered their heads. The words reached deeper than any formal warning. Prepared apologies suddenly felt too small against the truth they had allowed to exist for years. Across the terminal, passengers who had watched everything unfold remembered their own silence. One man quietly admitted, "I should have spoken up." A woman beside him answered, "So should I." Neither sister blamed them. "We all get another chance." the younger twin said softly. What matters is what we do next. The apology offered by the gate agent was accepted without hesitation. I am truly sorry, she whispered. We believe you. The older sister replied. Just make sure nobody else experiences this. There was no applause, no celebration, no victory speeches.